Hey y'all, welcome back to another Hesperie video. Today we're going to start work on picking up her hind legs. I refreshed her on some of the things she learned the previous day before I started filming. It took her 2 days to learn how to pick up both back feet with my hand, so I'm going to have to split this into 2 parts. I started out with using the stick and string around her hind end, getting her used to the feeling of it going on her hindquarters and her legs. She was a little bit unsure about it. You can see where she picks up that hind leg. It's not cocked because she's resting or relaxing, it's actually because she's getting ready to kick if she decides that it's a threat. I suspected that some of her sensitivity with things touching her hind legs was going to have to do with the mud that's clumping on her fetlocks and her pasterns. I felt like it might be irritating her skin and possibly causing some discomfort, and so while having things touch her back legs is not the most comfortable thing for her right now, you can see she's a bit sensitive about it. I thought that the best course of action would be for me to be able to access those back legs so I could give her a bath and scrub the mud off, and if she had any skin irritation, I could treat it accordingly. I also needed to be able to access all of her hooves so that I could start to trim her and prepare her to have a professional farrier work on her, because I could tell that her feet were a bit uncomfortable and I wanted to help her out with that. So I'm just waiting until I can get the string to touch her leg without any flinching or picking up her leg as if she's going to kick, and once I got that, I decided to move to the next thing, which would be introducing the flag. I wanted to see if I could touch her all over and especially her legs with the flag so that it would be a little safer, as she would be more prepared for the feeling of my hand going on her leg. I release when she reaches out and touches it, and I start to ask her to follow it. I want to help her to engage and start to be curious about things. So I just led her in a little circle. She was being a little sticky about the pressure just because she was unsure of the flag in front of her, but she was starting to check it out. Working with the flag is also super useful for getting them used to noisy things on them, as eventually I'll start waving the flag fast enough to make noise over and around her. This helps prepare them for wearing tack and eventually a rider. I had her follow it around in a few more circles, and she was really good when I started touching her head with it. I had a thought that because she was so good about the string going over her ears and sort of accessing her neck that way instead of going under her eye on her cheek, I thought she might be the same with the flag, and she proved me right. It's really interesting how all these horses learn and become comfortable with things in different ways, whereas most horses, most of the Mustangs that I've known at least, are a little bit shyer about their ears being touched. SB doesn't mind at all. She found that a lot more comfortable than having the flag go under her eye. She's a smart girl and super brave. It didn't take her long to figure out that the flag wasn't going to harm her. This is when I finally got her to actually lock onto the flag and start to feel like she was following it on her own accord a little bit, rather than just following me in circles, thinking, this is boring, why are we doing this? Next thing that I work on is having the flag come at their shoulder instead of starting at the head, and so what I'll do a little bit of is take it away and then bring it back, and so you saw just a bit of that work. This video is pretty condensed because I wanted to try to include all of the training that went into teaching her to get comfortable with touch all over her body and having her hind legs picked up without splitting it into 3 videos, so I opted for 2 and condensed the training just a little bit. But I included everything, I just took out some repetitions, and the clips are cut a little bit shorter than I typically like to do. I found her first sensitive spot just around the hock area, and so I held the flag on there until she was holding her leg down and not moving, and so I released there, and then I tried to see if she would pick her leg up again. And she's really funny. She goes, "I got scared of that once and it didn't kill me, so I'm not scared of it now." It really doesn't take her long to figure things out. Here's a bit more of that work on taking the flag away and bringing it back to her body without starting at her head. This scares them at first, so it's something that they have to learn. And so I was trying to see if I could find a sensitive spot on this leg, and I found it. She started to pick her leg up because she was unsure about the flag touching her. It's very normal for Mustangs to get afraid of things touching their legs. The ones that I've had recently have been really good about having their legs handled, but SP is a little bit on the easier side, I would say, as far as the stage of the training. SP's eyes were very itchy, and she appreciated a good scratch. It's always nice when they start coming out of their shell like this. I spent a little bit of time petting down her body and refreshing her on some stuff that we'd worked on the previous day, such as picking up her front feet. This is obviously sped up. As you can see, I was trying to touch down her leg with my hand, and she wasn't quite ready for that yet, so I just put the rope back on her leg to help bridge the gap for her so she could understand a little bit better. So after a little bit of desensitizing with the rope moving around on her leg, I was able to pick it up with the rope, and it didn't take long until I was able to put my hand on it and take the rope off. She remembered very well what she'd learned. She was almost ready to have me pick it up with my hand without using the rope. And a little bit more sped up training. She was really good with this front leg. She was definitely a bit better on the left side. So then it was time to move to work on the back feet. I started with the rope, which she was very used to having me swing the rope on her, and I started swinging it behind her back legs. I wanted to make sure she was okay with it going on her croup because that scared her the day before, and she remembered very well. She didn't seem fazed by it. So then became the task of getting the rope around her hind leg and getting that perfect swing without scaring her. I nailed it pretty quickly this time and used my foot to pick the rope up, which I generally don't recommend. It's probably safer to use a stick. But she's pretty good, and once I have the rope around her, I just want to let her get used to that feeling, so I give her a minute to not do anything, and then I start moving it around on her leg and trying to get it to go further up her leg and get her used to something wrapping around, sort of like the feeling of a hand wrapping around as it goes to pick up her leg. I follow the same process as the front legs, but I take a bit more time because it's generally a bit scarier for them, and it's also more dangerous for me, especially if one like SP is a little bit more sensitive about things touching her legs, as you'll see a little bit later on in this video. So she started to move, and I wasn't applying any pressure on the rope here. You can see I'm trying to keep it slack, but I'm letting her move around and get used to that feeling until she starts to settle and rest with her leg down. Then I start moving it again and lower it down on her leg so that I can start to get her used to the feeling of it wrapping around her pastern and eventually start to introduce pressure. I like to introduce the pressure as they're already stepping forward so I can get them to exaggerate the step which they're already doing, and that way I don't confuse them. So she's a little bit unsure. You can see how she picks up her leg a little bit higher and she goes to kick a little bit, but she doesn't actually kick that hard. And so I gave her a good release because she's trying really hard. Then I start to ask while she's stationary. The next step is for her to hold up her leg, and so I ask her to hold it up, and she's holding it quite high in the air and putting some tension on the rope, so I'm waiting until I feel like she softens. She goes to kick a little bit, but she doesn't actually kick backwards, and when I feel like she softens and relaxes her leg, I release. It's something that's kind of hard to see, but you can feel it in the rope, and so it's hard for me to explain what it feels like, but when she softens and relaxes, I release the pressure. She's doing really good because she's thinking about kicking, but she's restraining herself. And like I was saying earlier, I think that she has some discomfort around her pasterns, which could be the reason that she thinks about kicking. And I'm really excited to be able to give her a bath so that I can get the mud off her and start to get her skin feeling better, because I think that's the cause of that. I went back to using the stick for a minute there, and then I wanted to see if I could touch down her leg while I'm holding it up with my hand. She did very well with that. I find that it's typically a bit safer for me, or at least I feel like I can react quickly and get back into a safe area if she does go to kicking like she does here, if I'm already holding the leg up with the rope, and I think that she understands it a bit better and it's maybe a bit less scary for her. Like I said, she's doing very well because even this is a pretty mild reaction and she's not really going anywhere. She's just expressing, I'm not super comfortable with that, and so I'm trying to wait her out and move as slowly as she needs me to. I'm able to touch pretty far down her leg there, and I alternate it with picking up the leg with the rope so that she can have a little bit of practice with both ways. She's still a bit uncomfortable, but I wanted to see if I could get her to the point where I could hold the leg with my hand and take the rope off, and then I would finish up with that leg there. And I ended up managing that pretty quickly. She did super well, and so that was the end of working on that leg. She got a little bit of a break before I moved on to the next leg. I found that typically with Mustangs like her, if I can get them to that point where I can hold the leg up with my hand and take the rope off in the first training session that I do on their feet, the next day they're already so much better, and with just a little bit of progress each day, they're very quickly absolutely perfect for having their hooves handled and ready for trimming. This is just what has worked for me with the less reactive types, although I have had some that were so scared of things touching their legs that I had to work on it a little bit later in their training once I'd already built up some trust with other things. Hesperie isn't super afraid, she's just maybe a bit uncomfortable, but that's why I'm trying to do this so that I can help her faster. I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video I'll pick back up on Hesperie's back leg training. She had a bit more trouble with the right hind, which I wasn't surprised about because that was the one she was most reactive of things touching, and she was a bit harder with the right front too. So we spent a bit of time on that one, and y'all will get to see the process in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for future updates.